Guys, welcome back to a new episode of the Boundary Riders podcast, episode 76, I believe. I should have checked before the start of the episode, but we're going to keep on rolling with it. A lot to talk about today. We're going to be taking a look at Carlton, a little bit of a deep dive, see where they're at the moment. We're actually going to be predicting the rest of the AFL season to see who we think is going to make the top 8 and who we think is going to miss the finals. Also, our AFL fantasy breakdown, Flog of the week, AFL tipping, and much more. So let's roll the intro and get straight into it. And then Rankin from the pocket, don't tell me, Isaac Rankin!
Yeah.
He's just got the license for a brothel.
Well, I think Gather Round's going to be more than just AFL. I think this is next season.
It's at the handle at the back. Nick Dacos to get the pies home! He's done it! So guys, my brother is away this week, unfortunately. He's been taken out of the team. He was in poor form, so we just had to drop him. He just had work this week. That's pretty much it. But yeah, I guess we can talk a little bit about the Swans before we move into everything. Good win from Sydney in the end. We'll get to look. You know what? Look, we'll start with the Flog of the week because I think that's a decent point to start off with because that's a big news story. Recording this on a Monday, so the Flog of the week, as we do every single week of the AFL season, we've been picking the biggest, wanker. Person who deserves something to be called out for. And it's not like this person hasn't been called out by a few people this week, but I think he deserves it. And we've been doing it every single week. And at the end of the season, when we do our Boundary Riders medal countdown in between the bye of the regular season and the finals, we'll be picking a Flog of the Year. Now, I don't know if this person's actually going to be in contention for the Flog of the Year, but for what his actions after the game on Friday night was laughable, to say the least. I think most people would know where this is going. So Craig McRae will be getting this week's nomination for the Flog of the Week. So let me bring up the quotes that he's gone and said over the weekend. But to bring the context to it, if you missed the game or if, been out in the country and didn't have access to the internet over the past couple of days, and this is the first thing you're listening to, first of all, thank you for listening. But basically what happened over the weekend on Friday night, the Collingwood had a 27-point lead and in the last quarter, about the 14-minute mark, and the Swans were able to claw all their way back and take the lead. And with about a minute to go, Daniel McStay took a mark in the middle of the ground and Tom McCartan ran over the mark trying to chase him and obviously went over the top of it. And people were saying that he should have been given away a 50-metre penalty, Tom McCartan, because he's gone over the mark. And yeah, basically, he went about 5 metres over, which is, fair enough that he went that far. Well, it's fair enough that, you make that call. But look, I can say it on a biased point of saying that, look, he was running full pelt and it's hard for him to get back. And as soon as the umpire told him to move back 5 metres, he did immediately come back and then McStay played on anyway. So you could look at it that way. I understand that where people are coming from, though, that he did go over the mark a long way. So I can see both sides of the argument here. But, one, North Melbourne game, 2 months ago now? Collingwood players ran straight over the mark and they didn't say anything about it. Basically, we didn't see it happen, basically. And now, Craig McRae, after the game, had an almighty sook. I don't think I've seen a bigger sook from a fucking coach in a while, to say the least. So, after the game, when asked about the decision, Craig McRae came out and said that he's wrestling with the decision, wrestling with trying to blame others, trying to blame others, blame the umpires, or blame whatever. So, on the difficulty of losing. He said that if he thinks that the game was played at the MCG, the free kick would have been paid. There's definitely an advantage for a home ground. I thought it was 50-metre penalty by the letter of the law. I'm sure the AFL will come out and say it's a free kick or 50-metre penalty. There were a lot of deliberates tonight as well. It was a bit of a circus. I'm sure they'll come out to justify that too. But yeah, umpires don't always get it right. So, first of all, he's gone, where umpires at home, teams who have home ground advantage get free kicks more. Bro, do you realise you're coaching Collingwood? Are you serious? You're coaching Collingwood. You had, I think, we'll talk about the John Longmire response in a minute. You had 14 games at the MCG so far this year and 3 games at Marvel Stadium, which, by the way, you would have had majority supporter base. So you had 17 games worth of crowds this year that are in your favour. And you have a whinge because in round 21, you didn't have the home ground advantage, which, by the way, you had a pretty fair crowd at the SCG. If you were watching, maybe if you were sitting up in the fucking box, you'd actually realise it, Craig, you fucking sook. Anyway, moving on to another statement that he said. By the letter of the law, I agree. It could have been a free kick. It could have been a 50-metre penalty. Where's your response to letter of the law that North Melbourne should have got a 50-metre penalty? Was there, Craig? Was there any sort of thought about that? You want to maybe bring up a statement about that? No? Nothing about that? No. And people can make the point of like, oh, he was high emotion after the game. Yeah, well, I mean, come on, bro. You're a professional. You got to be a bit better than that. And to sit there and act like that's the reason you lost. Bro, you had a 27-point lead against the Sydney Swans, who have been in dreadful form, were playing like dog shit in that last quarter, and all that Sydney had to do was give the ball to Isaac Heaney and Chad Warner, and Sydney just stole it from you. All you had to do was chuck... Well, when Isaac Heaney... By the way, Isaac Heaney was having a good last quarter. You could have stopped him at one point. You're down on the bench. You could have told someone coming off the bench to say, hey, you stand on Isaac Heaney, and someone else, you stand on Chad Warner. You let them out of your sight, you drop next week. Obviously, I'm being a little bit facetious, but you understand what I mean. You could have done something about that, but you didn't, and that's why you lost. Yes, you could have got a 50-metre penalty, but who knows? You were losing every single centre clearance in that in those last 20 minutes. You were losing every single stoppage. Who's to say that ball doesn't go back to the middle after Daniel McRae kicks the goal, which is obviously, who knows if he kicks it. You think he would, but it goes straight back to the middle of the ground. It's the SCG. Warner gets the clearance. It goes inside the forward 50, Sydney kick a goal, and you can sit there and whinge about something else you didn't like, Craig. You absolute sook of a human. What are you whinging about? You get every single home ground advantage, and you have the gall after losing a 27-point lead 14 minutes into the last quarter to blame one umpiring decision, which I can see both sides of it. I think it's a bit ticky-touchy, but we've also seen a lot of times this year with your team as a prime example, and you have the whinging, sooky mentality to go, I don't know really who to blame, if it was the umpires or if it was me. I think I'll blame the... Fuck off, dude. And I actually liked Craig McRae before this, but now he's showing his true colours, because it's all well and good to see how good the guy is when they're winning, and he's all happy and jovial like he was in the last 2 years. But this year, he's shown a side of himself which is a very unflattering look, I'm going to say. So I don't hate Craig McRae, I don't even dislike him, but I do think this is a very bad look for himself, and he should be called out for it. Now, the AFL have came out and given him a warning. I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't like when the AFL come out and say, you can't say this, you can say that. I don't actually like that. I think the people should just be able to what they say, and then the wider public can give their criticism. I don't actually like when the AFL come out and say, you can't say this or you can't say that. Because at the end of the day, if Craig McRae does think it was the wrong call, he should have every right to say that. Now, look, if he actually did come out and say, look, I believed it was the wrong call, but at the end of the day, it was just a tough day for us. We should have won this game. I wouldn't have had any issue with Craig McRae at all. But if he comes out, tries to make the whole reason why they lost on one umpiring decision, when they were down by when they're up by 27 points on a 14-minute mark, so halfway through the quarter, you conceded 5 goals to a team who has been playing woeful and got killed by 112 points the week before. You can't sit there and tell me that is the most sookiest looking argument, and a guy who's over the age of 45, 50, I would say, you look like a sook. Get over yourself. You're playing for the biggest club in the fucking country, one of the biggest sporting organisation in the country. Get over yourself. The fact that you play at home 18 times a year, and you're going to have a fucking sook about one decision when you're up by 27 points, 14-minute mark of the last quarter. Get over yourself. Maybe you will be a nominee for Flog of the Year, Craig, because that was an absolute joke. And by the way, everyone except if you are bleeding black and white is laughing at you, because you made the grand final last year, and right now you're not even going to make the finals at this point. So what a drop off that's been. Absolutely embarrassing from you that you were going to blame the umpires off one decision when it was your fault that you didn't chuck anyone on Isaac Heaney or anyone on Chad Warner to stop the Swans dead. You are going to sit there and blame the umpires. Weak act. Anyway, that may be one of my best rants yet, guys. So 10 minutes in, we'll break forward from that. How about that? So Look, I understand if you're a Collingwood fan a bit upset about the loss. I get it. But I'm not so angry about Craig McRae getting... I'm not so angry about him saying the decision's wrong. Mine is blaming that for the whole reason that you lost. You know, going and saying that, oh, we would have been paid at the MCG. Which, by the way, we're going back into it. I don't care. How does that make you look? That makes you look fucking shit. That you're saying, oh, well, you know, that's basically just saying that you've won games off the umpires, which, I mean, on the outside looking in, we all know that. But you saying that as the head coach, not a very good look either. So, yeah. So, I don't have an issue with the decision. I don't have an issue with people disagreeing with the free kick, okay? Or the 50-metre penalty, or it should have been paid, okay? I don't have an issue with that at all. But the way that he acted after the game was childish, to say the least. But let's move on from that. So after that, I wanted to talk a little bit about Carlton, because Carlton, what a drop-off they've had. If it wasn't for Sydney losing last week by 112 points, I feel like Carlton would be talked about a lot more. So basically looking at it, is basically around, I think, 13 or 14, Carlton were top two, and were basically it was basically at that point, the grand final was Sydney v Carlton. Can anyone beat them to that grand final? Now, Sydney, look, they've got to win this week against Collingwood, but they're still not really premiership favourites, I would say. But on the other hand, Brisbane lost, so who the hell knows who's going to make the grand final this year? I think that makes what the season's been so exciting. But on to Carlton, what are they going to do now? Because they're ninth on the ladder. They are lucky that they've got there are pretty easy games left, I would say. They currently sit in ninth position, so I'm looking at the ladder now. They sit 1.1% behind Hawthorn, who also have a nice record going into the finals. So, get into our ladder prediction stuff in a minute, because I've done that for the next 2 weeks, and look at it in more of a deep dive, so to speak. But I wanted to take a look at Carlton's drop-off, and first of all, I want to take a look at the injury list, because I understand people who hate Carlton, or people who, you know, don't like to blame injuries, don't want to sit there and look at how Carlton's injury list is looking. But it is a huge factor in how they've dropped off, I would say. Looking at the injury list right now, this is on Monday, so it hasn't been fully updated. But you've got Matt Carroll, not in the team. Adam Cherra's in their best 23. Matt Cottrell's in their best 23. He's out for the whole season as well. David Cunningham, he's probably around the mark. Tom de Koning probably would. If they make finals, he should be okay, but who knows. Sam Doherty as well. He's been out for the whole year, though. But there is talk that he could be back in the finals if they go there. Corey Durden as well, probably up there with their best 22 as a small forward. Sam Durden hasn't been in the team all year, but that's another one. Orazio Fantasia, he's probably around the mark. Caleb Marchbank as well. Hudson O'Keefe. Jack Silvani's been out the whole year. Zach Williams, he is, but I think he's been very good when he played up forward. And then this weekend, we obviously had Lockie Fogarty go down with a collarbone, Jack Martin with a hamstring along with Adam Sard. We had Charlie Curnow go down with an ankle, Jordan Boyd with an adductor. He had to come in on and off the ground the whole game. I don't even know if he had a disposal in the end. And then we had Harry Mackay after the game say that he's had to go for scans for his quad. So that is just a huge injury list. And if you look at it, that's probably around the mark of Richmond where we're thinking, like on the size of the injury list. Now, it is late in the season, and they were doing okay throughout the season on the injury fronts. And yeah, I think looking at the injury list, there's an understanding of why they have dropped off so bad. But this team was second on the ladder and were challenging Sydney for the two best teams in the comp this year. And in the last 5 weeks, they've lost 4 of their past 5 games. And last week, they got smashed by Hawthorn. Like, smashed. Now, again, injuries are a huge factor there. They had 4 players off on the bench. They only had 1 player fit. And Jordan Boyd had to stay on the field, who was injured as well. So, again, that's another factor. You can't deny that. But I'm not going to make that as the whole excuse, because Carlton should have locked in they should be in the finals. You can't be second on the ladder for the majority of the year, or it was one of the top 4 teams for the majority of the year, and have fallen off this badly. So I think that's a big problem. Now, they've got 6 players that they potentially have to change off this week. But looking at their VFL team, there is really not a lot in there. They had Lord, who had a pretty decent game last week, and Jackson Binns has had a little bit of experience at AFL level, but there's not a lot to really pick from, I would say. So at the moment, it's going to be really interesting to see what the Blues kind of do in the next couple of weeks to get themselves to finals. They are lucky that they have a pretty nice run home in the last 2 games. But yeah, looking at it, they had a guy on the weekend kick 7 goals for them. But funny thing is, he's not even on an AFL list, so he's not going to be able to get used. There's just not a lot to pick from for Carlton, which is like they've got Lewis Young. He probably he probably comes in, I would say. There's just not a lot that the Blues can really do. Corey Durden did play in the reserve, so I would expect him to come in. But yeah, there's just not a lot for Carlton. So they are, like I said, they are very lucky that they've got a pretty nice run for the last 2 games. They've got West Coast and St Kilda. Now, we obviously saw a couple of years ago, though, that they had, everyone thought they were going to make the finals, and they choked in the last 4 games and lost that historical one against Collingwood. I can't see them doing that here. So I guess that will move us through to the AFL, rest of the season predictions. So I have actually gone that Carlton will make the 8. So what my predictions are is I have gone that Sydney will finish top, Geelong will finish 2nd, GWS will finish 3rd, Brisbane 4th, Bulldogs 5th, Hawthorn 6th. So Hawthorn jump into a home final. Port Adelaide are in 7th. Carlton do scrape into the 8. Collingwood finish 9th. Fremantle are the team to drop out. And then the Gold Coast will finish 11th, Essendon 12th, Melbourne 13th, Crows 14th, St Kilda 15th, and so on and so forth. Doesn't really matter. But yeah. So looking at it, I'll have a quick look. So the teams that were pretty contentious, you'd have to say, are Hawthorn. Their last 2 games are against Richmond and North Melbourne. So Richmond, they play at the MCG. I think they just kill them by 50-odd points. That will be a good percentage boost. And they play North Melbourne down in Tassie for their last game, which is an interesting one because both teams are pretty good down there. Well, Hawthorn is a lot better, but North Melbourne are a little bit more competent. And I still think Hawthorn will obviously win that one pretty comfortably. Moving to Carlton. So their last 2 games, they got West Coast, which is over in Perth. I still think they'll win it pretty comfortably because I think West Coast really played their grand final last week against North Melbourne, and then they've got St Kilda to finish, which is a danger game for them because St Kilda have been pretty decent the last couple of weeks. But looking at Fremantle, they've got a couple of tough games. They've got the Giants, and then they've got Port Adelaide at home. So Giants obviously being the most informed team of the comp right now. So that's a really tough game over in Sydney. And then they've got Port Adelaide. And Port Adelaide have been the second most informed team in the comp, basically, with Brisbane. So there's 2 really tough games. That's kind of the reason why I've got Fremantle dropping all the way down to 10th. That's just going to be really tough. Collingwood finishing 9th. They do have Brisbane and they have Melbourne. They have Brisbane at the MCG, so I think they can win that next week or this week. I will get to our tips in a minute, but that's where I'm kind of looking at that one. And the Melbourne, tough one because it's Melbourne are just going to shut it down if we saw against Port Adelaide. So that's kind of what we're looking on them. The Bombers were the slight chance. They got Sydney and Brisbane. I can't see them making the finals from there. Port Adelaide, the reason why I've got them dropping out of the top 2 is they've got the showdown. They still haven't been up. The Crows have been their bogey team for a while now, so I don't think they win the showdown this week. And then Fremantle in Perth, tough one. So I think they'll probably lose their last 2 games. So, but again, Port Adelaide have been in really good form, and they've been beating some top teams. So you can't count them out either. And then last thing we'll take a look at quickly is Geelong. So Geelong have St Kilda and West Coast to finish down in Geelong. So I don't know why I've done that. Geelong are going to kill West Coast, but I've put them to win by 20 points for some reason. But they should beat St Kilda this week. I think they'll be fine. They'll beat them by like 40-odd points. And then West Coast, they'll smash them down in Geelong. West Coast will probably rest a few players, send them off quickly, and then, yeah, that'll probably be about it for them. So that's kind of where I've got the ladder looking at right now. The Western Bulldogs, actually, quickly, they got North Melbourne and GWS, so that's a really interesting last game against the Giants. North Melbourne, they should beat North this week. I couldn't see them losing it. I know they did obviously do last year when they dropped that game against West Coast, and they inevitably saw them miss the finals, but I can't see them missing it this year. I think they got North Melbourne covered, and that Giants game will actually will be a real contributor to see what teams finish. Because that's the reason why I haven't got the Giants in second spot, is because I see the Bulldogs winning that game. That's down in Ballarat. What an interesting last round. They've got a game down in Tassie and a game in Ballarat. That's interesting. But yeah, I kind of see that's how the rest of the season's going to go. Make sure let me know down below, guys, where you think the rest of the AFL season prediction, where the rest of the teams are going to finish. Yeah, I've got Sydney up the top, Geelong second, Giants third, Brisbane fourth. So Sydney would play Brisbane in the first final, and Geelong would play the Giants. You got the Bulldogs up against Carlton, and then Hawthorn up against Port Adelaide. That's kind of what I've got in the finals bracket. Yeah, again, let me know what you guys think. That there's so many changes that could happen to this final 8 right now, where teams finish. I really would like to see Fremantle make it, but they've got a really tough run home, so they're going to really have to turn around their form that they've dropped off on the last couple of weeks. But with that being said, guys, I kind of revealed a couple of them already, but let's get to our AFL tips for round 22. So, looking at it right now, we start on Friday night between Essendon and Sydney. I've gone the Swans. On Saturday, I've gone the Gold Coast over Melbourne, GWS over Fremantle, Collingwood over Brisbane, the Crows over Port Adelaide, Geelong over St Kilda. And on Sunday, I've gone the Bulldogs over North Melbourne, Hawthorn over the Tigers, and then the Blues to finish over the West Coast Eagles. Now, my brother actually hasn't given me his tips this week. I forgot to ask him, so maybe I'll leave him in the pinned comment down below what he's tipped. But yeah, first of all, we'll talk about the Sydney Essendon game. This isn't Marvel Stadium, but Sydney have a pretty good record there. I can't really see Essendon winning this game. They will have a bit of a response. I wouldn't be too surprised if they respond a bit after the loss last week against the Gold Coast, where they should have won the game. I mean, that was an embarrassment, really. But I still think Sydney kind of found their form late in that game, and I'll be interested to see how Essendon try to combat the stars of Sydney like Heaney and Warner and that. But I just think Sydney found that spark that they needed. They needed to get a win, just something to give them a little bit of this re-spark back into their season, and I feel like that's what they needed. So I think this will be a close game. Historically, Sydney v Essendon have been pretty close, but I'm leaning towards the Swans on that one. Another massive game, GWS versus Fremantle. This is almost an elimination final for the Dockers. I've gone the Giants, though. I think they're hard to pick against at the moment. They've had some slow starts, which could worry them. But against the Dockers, I don't think it will. Fremantle are the lowest scoring team inside the top 8. So even if Fremantle get out to a good lead early, the Giants will be able to peg them back, I believe. If Giants start this one well, this game's done. Freo won't be able to catch back. I don't see it. GWS look too good, too strong. So I think that's where it's going to be won. GWS as well, their forward line's looking so good at the moment without even Toby Green really firing. So I think that's something that the Giants have to get going, though, going into finals. They have to get their captain involved. But other than that, I think GWS are playing brilliant footy, and they're such a good team to watch. So that's kind of what I'm leaning for on that one. Collingwood against the Brisbane Lions. This one's such a tough one. If this wasn't at the MCG, this would be Brisbane every single day of the week. But because it's at the MCG, grand final rematch, the only reason really why I've gone Collingwood here is because it's at the MCG. Brisbane, I think they were good last week, but they just couldn't put GWS away early enough, and that's why the Giants ran over the top of them. I think that's not the worst thing in the world, though. Obviously, we've talked about teams in the past having really good form and then having a loss, which they kind of need. I think this is a loss that Brisbane kind of needed going into finals. I still think they'll make the top 4, which is a good sign for them. But yeah, I think they needed that loss just to, realise what sort of problems they were having. The things that were getting covered over when they were winning games, we get more spotlight onto it. But because this is at the MCG, that's the only real reason. I think Brisbane... Again, I wouldn't be surprised if Brisbane win this game by any means. But being at the MCG, Collingwood, I feel like they got to respond after last week. Craig McRae surely got to do something. He can't just sit there and whinge all day. So I think he's got to find a game plan to get Collingwood to win this one. I think Collingwood can win it, and that's why I've kind of tipped them. After that, we have the Crows and Port Adelaide. This is a Port Adelaide home game for the showdown. Port Adelaide last week absolutely had to slug it out against the Demons, but they did what they had to do, and they did it well. The Crows, they obviously won really well against the Bulldogs, and so this really sets up for both teams being in decent form. I think the Crows, even though Taylor Walker probably will be out because he's got his eye injury, I still think the Crows are going to be a little bit more stronger here. The Crows' tools have always been an issue for Port Adelaide the last couple of years. Still thought back into this team is going to be really strong, really hard to beat. Fogarty's in decent form as well. He kicked 5 goals on the weekend. In Port Adelaide, their form is the only reason why I'm considering changing my tip to Port Adelaide right now, because every single other thing is telling me go the Crows here because they've got a better record. Their tall forwards obviously have dominated Port Adelaide's defence in the past. The only reason why I'm considering Port is their hot form at the moment, and they haven't been dropping off, which is what I've expected. Now, this may be the game when they drop off. Who knows? That's kind of what I'm leaning for there, is the Crows to win this one. It's usually a 3 or 4 goal game, usually in the showdown, so that's where I'm kind of leaning for. But I think this is going to be a big game, though. Big showdown coming up. And if the Crows do want to put some dampeners on a Port Adelaide top 4 finish, this will be a game for them. This may be their maybe their grand final for the Adelaide Crows. And then the final game I wanted to take a look at is the danger game I wanted to take a look at is the St Kilda game up against Geelong. I actually think this is a big danger game for Geelong because the last couple of weeks, the Cats have been lucky enough to get over the top of teams like the Crows. They could have lost that game in Fremantle. Freo were in front for a lot of it, but the Cats just pegged them back in the last quarter. So I feel like the Cats, they're either going to go two ways here. They're either going to smash St Kilda and get themselves primed for finals, or they're going to drop off and let the Saints have a bit of a go. I think it is going to be the former. I think Geelong are just going to flog them. But I do think there is a chance here that St Kilda get up for this game. Try and, take out a big team and knock Geelong off their pedestal that they've been on for the last couple of weeks. Because they nearly lost to the Crows and they nearly lost to Fremantle. So I think there's only two ways this can go. But I'm going to pick the Cats. I feel like it's really hard to go against them at the moment. They are in really good form and they are still winning games, even though they're not, demolishing teams. But let's move to our AFL tipping comp. We, of course, forgot to do this one last week as we didn't get the tips done. But looking at it, everyone really had a tough week. I only got 2. That is embarrassing. How did I only get 2, bro? Oh, my God. Yeah, I didn't have a very good week. What did I get in the end? I got, far out. I didn't get any, did I? I got, oh, my God. I got Hawthorn. And I got St Kilda. Oh my God. I had 0 to Sunday. That's embarrassing for me. Now, of course, as we have all expected throughout the whole year, Brendan is still on top. He did get pegged back by 1 tip this week. Paul did get 1 back on him, but he's still 6 tips in front of second. Harvey is in third. My brother's had a couple of good weeks. He's jumped into equal fourth spot on 120. Oh no, equal third spot my brother is right now. I've dropped down to 8th, but only 1 tip behind third spot. And the top scorer this week was Larnish. They got 6 tips. So really good job from them. They jumped all the way from, nearly bottoms. Oh, it wouldn't have been bottom. Would have been close to bottom though. So they jumped up all the way to 10th spot. So that's really good job from them. And Daniel's dropped down to the bottom. I've said his name a few times this year. Hasn't been on the bottom all the time. Jumped back a couple of tips to get equal bottom with Johnny, the evolutionized, but he's still in bottom spots. It's really unfortunate for them. But Brendan S still leads the tipping comp by 6 tips. So it's really unfortunate that he's not really giving everyone else a chance. I feel like it's really mean from him, but nonetheless, he still leads it. To our AFL fantasy chat to finish the episode of today's podcast, guys. Sorry if it's a little bit shorter, just because my brother's not here. So you probably noticed that they're a bit shorter when my brother's not here and a bit longer when he is. But yeah, let's get to our AFL fantasy chat to finish things off. I obviously had a bye week in the league. I'm playing the Loser Cup anyway, but I'm still in the finals race. I've got the prelim this week. But looking at my team, I had a couple of good games from a couple of players. Sheasel played well, 123. Martin, 127. Jordan Clark, 126. Bontempelli, 126 as well. Rosie with the 113. 127 from Heaney, obviously, with his great last quarter. Dylan Moore as well was my top scorer with the 132. But there were a couple of poor scores. Dacos only got 71. Young with the 75. Richards with the 65. I brought in Treloar. He only got 85. Who else? Luke Davies-Uniacke only got 72. Fuck me. I had Zorko as my captain. I had to do a late change of the trades, and I rolled back my team, and I forgot to change my captain. So Zorko was my captain in the end, and he got, 84? 86. So not that good. Caldwell only got 62. My lowest scorer of the week was Cam Rayner, which was really annoying because he had a really good couple of months, really good month, and then unfortunately that dropped off. But moving to my trades for this week, I've had a lot of money in the kitty. I got rid of Humphreys. He's kind of bottomed out. He did really well for me with his pricing, but he's gone, and I've picked up Curtin. That's kind of a rookie one at this stage. And I've made the big one. I've made the big trade. I felt like this has to be done now. I've got rid of Oscar McInerney. I obviously had to pick him up because of the Tom DeConing injury. And I've gone for Tristan Cherry. I've gone all in. For the highest price player right now is Tristan Cherry. A couple of 150 and 60s. He's due. He can get that. He's got Tim English. Don't really think that Tim English is going to be much of a defensive ruckman this week. So I'm backing Tristan Cherry in. But looking at the league itself, I want to take a quick look at my brother's score because it was quite embarrassing. No, he only lost by 16 points. So that's unlucky for him. He could have won this game. I'll look at the game quickly. So he had Jack Steele as his captain. That was 99. So he had a chance here. And he had his captain on Tristan Cherry. That was really the only reason why my brother had a chance here was because he had his captain on Cherry. But the Lockie Neal was probably his killer. Only got 69. Ed Richards as well. And Bailey Dale only got 45. That was probably the killer in the end. He's usually good for 80. So there's a couple of unfortunate ones there for my brother. Looking at the other guy, he had some decent players looking at it. But really, he should have probably won this game. I mean, Tom Powell with 105. He hasn't really done that much this year after the first couple of weeks. Zach Merritt came back into some form with the 134. Other than that, really, my brother really should have won this one, I would say. I'm sorry to him. And I think actually I may have him this week. No, I don't. I have Paul's Vikings. He was the one who won the other game. He got 2,450 points. So I'm in for a hard game. He scored higher than anyone in the whole league this week. And he's in the bottom rung. He's not even in the... He's in the second lowest part of the... he was the lowest seeded person in the finals right now. And he was the one who got the highest score out of anyone. He's on fire. So Paul's Vikings had a tough start to the year, but he's really coming back like a steam train. And I'm going to have to play him this week. So that's really unfortunate. And I will be very lucky if I win that one. I have to really pick my captains. I'm going to have to really look at it again. But at this stage, I've got Cherry as my captain and my vice on Dane Zorko against Collingwood. But basically, that's it for the podcast this week, guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you watch this over on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you were listening over on Spotify, of course, make sure to leave us 5 stars because I asked really nicely. I like that little outro that we're bringing to the channel. And of course, make sure to leave us a follow so you're notified on the podcast and the review every single week. But again, guys, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you all next week.